I paid $30,000 to fly my entire family to Hawaii, but as the wedding march played, I looked to my left and saw 30 empty chairs. They all secretly boycotted my wedding. Have you ever given your family everything, only to realize they will never show up for you? Share your experience in the comments below, and please subscribe to hear how I finally broke the cycle. To understand the truth my late father left behind in that manila folder, we have to go back to the beginning, back to the moment before the illusion shattered. I smoothed my hands over the delicate lace of my wedding dress, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. For 2 years, my fiancé, Mark, and I had scrimped and saved every extra penny we had. We skipped vacations, cooked every meal at home, and worked overtime hours, all for one singular dream, a destination wedding on the sun-drenched beaches of Maui. But I didn't just save for Mark and myself. I had paid for my entire family to be here. My mother, my 2 aunts, my uncle, and my younger sister, Chloe. I covered their flights, their hotel rooms at a premium resort, and even their meals. It cost me nearly $30,000, effectively emptying the savings account my late father had set up for me before he passed away. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted my family with me. Since Dad died 3 years ago, our family had felt fractured, held together by fragile threads. I honestly believed this Hawaiian getaway would be the perfect opportunity to heal old wounds. I wanted my mother to relax by the ocean. I wanted my sister to stand beside me as my maid of honor, holding my bouquet while I promised my life to Mark. I thought my generosity would show them how much I loved them. I thought buying their tickets was a guarantee that for once in my life, they would show up for me. I was so incredibly naive. To understand how it all went so wrong, you have to understand my sister, Chloe. Chloe was the baby of the family, the undeniable golden child. Where I was quiet, studious, and reliable, Chloe was loud, spontaneous, and demanding of the spotlight. If I won a spelling bee, Chloe would throw a tantrum until my mother bought her a toy to make her feel better. If I graduated college, Chloe would announce a sudden career change that dominated the dinner conversation. My mother always defended her. "She's sensitive, Maya," Mom would tell me, sighing as she stroked Chloe's hair. "You are strong. You don't need the attention like she does." And I accepted that role. I was the strong one, the independent one. When Mark proposed, I didn't make a huge fuss. We had a quiet dinner, and I called my mother the next day. Her first reaction wasn't congratulations, it was panic over how Chloe would feel, since Chloe was currently single and feeling vulnerable. So when I booked the tickets to Hawaii, I made sure to book Chloe a first-class upgrade. I wanted to preemptively soothe any jealousy she might feel about me getting married. I bought her a beautiful silk bridesmaid dress that complemented her skin tone perfectly, sacrificing my own preference for the bridal party aesthetic. I tried so hard to manage her emotions. I never imagined that my sister's need for the spotlight would entirely eclipse my wedding day. We arrived in Maui 4 days before the wedding. Mark and I flew in on a Tuesday to finalize the catering and the floral arrangements. My family was scheduled to arrive on Thursday morning, giving them plenty of time to settle in, attend the rehearsal dinner, and relax before the Saturday ceremony. On Wednesday night, I texted our family group chat, "Can't wait to see you guys tomorrow. Let me know when you land and I'll have the resort shuttle waiting for you." I waited an hour. No response. I checked the chat again. My mother had read the message, and so had my aunts. I felt a tiny prickle of unease in the back of my mind, but I brushed it off. They were probably busy packing. Traveling across the Pacific was stressful, and I didn't want to be a demanding bride. Thursday morning arrived. I sat in the resort lobby for 3 hours, watching the automatic doors slide open, eagerly expecting my family to walk through with their luggage. By noon, I was borderline panicking. I called my mother's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I called Chloe. Voicemail. I even called my Aunt Susan. Nothing. "Maybe their flight was delayed," Mark suggested gently, rubbing my shoulders as I stared blankly at my phone screen. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. But when I checked the airline website, Their flight had landed right on schedule. The shuttle driver confirmed he had waited at the baggage claim, but none of my family members had shown up. They weren't in Hawaii. It wasn't until Thursday evening, as Mark and I sat alone at what was supposed to be our bustling rehearsal dinner, that my phone finally buzzed. It was a text message from my mother. It didn't start with an apology. It didn't even start with a greeting. "Maya, honey, please don't be mad. There's been a slight change of plans. Chloe met a wonderful man last month, and they decided they simply couldn't wait to start their lives together. They are eloping in Las Vegas today. Chloe was so anxious about doing it alone, so we rerouted our layover and flew to Vegas to support her. I know you'll understand. You're the strong one, and Mark is there with you. Chloe needs us right now. Have a beautiful wedding. We will celebrate with you when you get back." I read the message 3 times. The words blurred together as tears welled in my eyes. A wonderful man last month? My sister had known a man for 4 weeks, decided to elope on the exact weekend of my destination wedding, a wedding I had paid for, and my entire family abandoned me to go watch her. I had paid for their flights to Los Angeles for their layover, only for them to secretly book a connecting flight to Nevada instead of Hawaii. They used my money to get halfway across the country, then ditched me. I dropped my phone onto the table. The screen cracked against the heavy ceramic plates, but the sound was nothing compared to the sound of my heart shattering into a million pieces. Saturday morning, the day of my wedding, I sat in the bridal suite, staring out the window at the crashing turquoise waves. The makeup artist gently dabbed concealer under my eyes, trying desperately to hide the dark, swollen circles from 2 nights of nonstop crying. There was no lively chatter in the room. There was no clinking of champagne glasses, no mother helping me step into my dress, no sister fixing my veil. It was just me, the quiet hum of the air conditioner, and the devastating weight of my family's absence. Mark had been an absolute rock, holding me as I sobbed, offering to cancel the whole thing. But I refused. I wasn't going to let Chloe steal my marriage along with my family. When the music started playing, I walked out of the suite alone. I stepped onto the sandy aisle, clutching my bouquet so tightly my knuckles turned white. I looked toward the altar where Mark stood, his eyes brimming with tears of pride and sorrow for me. Then I looked to the left side of the aisle, my side. 30 white folding chairs sat on the sand. Every single one of them was completely, agonizingly empty. Not a single aunt, uncle, or cousin had come. They had all chosen Vegas. They had all chosen Chloe. A ragged sob escaped my lips, echoing over the sound of the ocean, as I walked down the aisle entirely alone, cloaked in the ultimate humiliation. As I reached the end of the sandy aisle, Mark stepped forward and gently took my trembling hands in his. The warmth of his palms anchored me, keeping me from collapsing right there in the sand. I forced myself to look away from the 30 empty white chairs on my left and focused entirely on his face. Behind him, his family sat with tear-filled eyes, radiating a mixture of immense pity and genuine love. It was a stark, agonizing contrast. The officiant began speaking, his voice blending with the rhythmic crashing of the Hawaiian waves. I barely registered the beautiful words about love, commitment, and weathering storms. My mind was trapped in a relentless loop of rejection. How could a mother simply abandon her eldest daughter on her wedding day? How could they all smile for photos in a cheap Vegas chapel while I stood here, hollowed out by their absence? When it was time for our vows, my voice cracked. Mark squeezed my hands tighter, silently giving me his strength. "I promise to choose you every single day," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise to be your family when you feel like you have none. I will never leave you standing alone." Tears spilled over my eyelashes, ruining the carefully applied makeup. I choked out my vows in return, vowing to love him unconditionally. When he finally kissed me, the applause from his side of the aisle was deafening, as if his family was trying to cheer loudly enough to fill the suffocating silence from my side. I was officially a married woman, but the title of daughter and sister felt entirely stripped away. The reception was held on a beautiful open-air terrace overlooking the ocean, decorated with cascading orchids and glowing fairy lights. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, yet it felt like a beautifully decorated graveyard. Half of the circular tables were completely empty. The pristine white plates, the personalized name cards I had handwritten for my mother, my aunts, and Chloe, all sat untouched. Mark's parents, Susan and David, did their best to wrap me in warmth. Susan hugged me tightly, whispering that I looked like a princess and that they were so proud to have me as a daughter. I smiled and thanked her, but her kindness only highlighted the gaping wound in my chest. My own mother hadn't even called to see if I walked down the aisle safely. Sitting at our sweetheart table, I made the colossal mistake of checking my phone. I opened social media, and there it was. Chloe had posted a live stream an hour ago. She was wearing a short, sparkly white dress, holding a plastic bouquet, laughing hysterically in front of an Elvis impersonator. Behind her, cheering wildly, was my mother, my Aunt Susan, my uncle. They were all wearing the Hawaiian leis I had shipped to them weeks ago as a pre-trip gift. They were using my gifts, having traveled on my dime, to celebrate my sister. A wave of nausea washed over me. I quickly turned my phone off and shoved it deep into my bridal clutch, plastering a fake smile on my face as the catering staff began serving the first course. I just wanted this night to be over. Dinner had just concluded when a subtle shift in the room caught my attention. The venue staff was quietly talking to an older gentleman near the entrance of the terrace. He clearly wasn't a tourist who had wandered in from the beach. He was dressed impeccably in a light gray linen suit, holding a worn leather briefcase. I frowned, leaning closer to Mark. "Do you know who that is?" I whispered, nodding toward the entrance. Mark squinted, shaking his head. "No, one of your dad's old friends, maybe." The staff member pointed toward our sweetheart table, and the older gentleman gave a polite nod, adjusting his glasses before making his way across the terrace. As he walked closer, illuminated by the warm glow of the string lights, a jolt of recognition hit me. The silver hair, the sharp jawline, the distinct way he carried himself. It was Arthur Sterling. Mr. Sterling had been my late father's closest friend and his personal attorney for over 3 decades. He had handled Dad's estate when he passed away, guiding me through the confusing legal jargon with immense patience. But I hadn't spoken to him in nearly 2 years. What on earth was my father's lawyer doing walking into my wedding reception in Maui? My heart began to race. Mr. Sterling approached our table, offering a small, deeply sympathetic smile. He didn't look like a man who was here to celebrate. He looked like a man carrying an incredibly heavy burden. "Maya," Mr. Sterling said softly, his voice a comforting, familiar rumble. "You look absolutely breathtaking. Your father would have been so incredibly proud of you today." "Mr. Sterling," I breathed out, standing up quickly. What are you doing here? Is everything all right? Did you fly all the way from Chicago?" He nodded slowly, clutching the leather briefcase tight against his side. "I did. I apologize for the unexpected intrusion on such an important evening, but I am here strictly fulfilling a promise I made to your father shortly before he passed away." I felt Mark stand up beside me, placing a protective hand on the small of my back. "A promise?" I echoed, my brow furrowing in deep confusion. "Dad died 3 years ago. What does he have to do with my wedding day? Mr. Sterling sighed, glancing briefly at the empty tables on the left side of the terrace, before looking back at me with a pained expression. "Your father was a very observant man, Maya. He saw the dynamics of your family much more clearly than you ever realized. He anticipated that today might not go exactly as you hoped." With a steady hand, he unlatched his briefcase and reached inside. He pulled out a thick, heavy manila folder, The flap was secured with a thick layer of red wax, stamped with my father's old signet ring. He instructed me to hand-deliver this to you on the day of your wedding, but only after the ceremony, Mr. Sterling explained, handing the heavy folder toward me. He said you would need to read it immediately, especially if you were left standing alone. My hands trembled violently as I took the manila folder from Mr. Sterling. The thick paper felt incredibly heavy, as if it contained the physical weight of my father's ghost. The red wax seal was perfectly intact, the familiar crest of my dad's ring pressing into the center. I traced the wax with my thumb, a fresh wave of tears springing to my eyes. My dad had known. Even from a hospital bed 3 years ago, he knew exactly what my mother and sister were capable of. "Thank you, Arthur," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He offered a small bow of his head, excused himself to the hotel lobby, and promised to wait if I had any questions. Mark wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Do you want to open it now, or wait until we get to the room?" "Now," I said firmly, a sudden surge of adrenaline replacing my grief. "I need to know." We stepped away from the reception, slipping into a quiet, secluded alcove overlooking the moonlit beach. I took a deep breath, the scent of sea salt filling my lungs, and slid my fingernail under the wax seal. It cracked with a sharp snap. Inside, there was a stack of official-looking legal documents, but sitting right on top was a handwritten letter on my father's personalized stationery. I recognized his neat, slanted cursive immediately. My eyes frantically scanned the first few lines. "My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, it means you are married, and it likely means your mother and sister have shown you their true colors. I am so sorry I am not there to protect you, but I am leaving you with the truth. The savings account you used for this wedding was never the real inheritance." The savings account you used for this wedding was never the real inheritance. I stared at that sentence, the words blurring as fresh tears welled in my eyes. I read on, my father's familiar voice echoing clearly in my mind. "Maya, my sweet, reliable girl, I spent years watching you bend over backward to accommodate your mother and your sister. I saw how they took your kindness for granted, how they demanded the sun and left you in the shade. Before I passed, I knew that if I left my estate to you openly, they would drain you dry. They would use guilt and obligation to take every penny, and you, with your beautiful, generous heart, would let them." My breath hitched. He had seen it. All those years when I thought I was keeping the peace, my father had been quietly observing the toll it took on me. "The $30,000 in that savings account was a decoy," the letter continued. "It was a test. I knew that once I was gone, they would expect you to fund their whims. I set up that small account to give you the means to try one last time to bring them together. If they are not standing beside you today, it means my worst fears were realized. They took your generosity and abandoned you anyway. But dry your tears, my darling daughter, because your financial ties to them end today." I looked up at Mark, my hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. He gently placed a hand over mine, steadying me as I flipped to the second page of my father's final message. I swallowed hard and continued reading, the glow of the Hawaiian moonlight illuminating my father's looping cursive. "I arranged my true estate into a locked, irrevocable trust. I left your mother the house and her own designated pension, which I am certain she and Chloe have likely already remortgaged or spent. But the bulk of my life's work, my investments, and the commercial properties I secretly purchased before I got sick were all placed entirely in your name. However, I stipulated that the trust would only unlock on the day of your marriage, effectively shielding it from your mother's legal reach and giving you time to build a life of your own." I flipped through the heavy legal documents beneath the letter. There were property deeds, investment portfolios, and bank statements with numbers so large they made me dizzy. My father hadn't just left me a nest egg, he had left me an empire. Millions of dollars securely locked away, entirely untouchable by anyone in my family except me. Arthur has all the paperwork ready for your signature, the letter concluded. Do not feel guilty, Maya. You owed them nothing, yet you gave them everything you had. Now it is time to live for yourself. Build a beautiful life with Mark. Protect your future, and never let them make you feel small again. I love you, and I am walking beside you today. Love, Dad. I collapsed against Mark's chest, weeping. But for the first time in 3 days, they weren't tears of humiliation or grief. They were tears of profound relief. My father had protected me from beyond the grave. We walked back into the reception about 20 minutes later. I felt entirely different. The crushing weight of rejection that had suffocated me all day had vanished, replaced by a quiet, unbreakable armor. Mr. Sterling was waiting by the bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I walked straight up to him and hugged him tightly. He let out a surprised chuckle, patting my back. I assume you read it? He asked softly. I did, I replied, pulling back to look at him. Thank you, Arthur, for keeping his secret, for flying out here. Your father was a brilliant man, Mr. Sterling smiled, his eyes twinkling. He knew exactly what he was doing. I have the formal documents back at my hotel. We can sign them whenever you are ready. Enjoy your evening, Maya. You have a lot to celebrate. As Mr. Sterling departed, I looked around the terrace. I looked at the empty chairs that had caused me so much agony just hours ago. Suddenly, they didn't look like symbols of my family's abandonment. They looked like freedom. My mother and sister had shown me exactly who they were, and by doing so, they had severed the final thread of guilt I held toward them. Mark took my hand and led me to the dance floor. As we swayed to our favorite song, surrounded by the genuine love of his family and our closest friends, I finally smiled, a real, genuine smile. I was free. I was a wealthy, independent, married woman, and the toxic cycle of my family's emotional abuse was officially over. I woke up the next morning to the sound of tropical birds singing outside our honeymoon suite. The Hawaiian sun streamed through the sheer curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the white sheets. Mark was still sound asleep beside me, his arm wrapped securely around my waist. For a few blissful minutes, I just lay there, soaking in the serene reality that I was finally his wife. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and buzzed again and again. The sound was frantic, like an angry swarm of bees. I gently slid out of Mark's embrace, grabbed the phone, and walked out onto the private balcony overlooking the ocean. I had deliberately turned my phone on Do Not Disturb during the reception last night. Now, looking at the lock screen, I saw an explosion of notifications. There were 24 missed calls, 15 from my mother, 7 from Chloe, and 2 from my Aunt Susan. Below the missed calls was an endless stream of text messages. The serene peace of the morning fractured slightly as I braced myself. A day ago, seeing this many missed calls would have sent me into a spiral of anxiety, fearing an emergency. Today, holding the knowledge of my father's trust fund in the back of my mind, I simply felt a cold detachment. I unlocked the screen and opened the family group chat. The audacity of what I read almost made me laugh out loud. The messages from my mother started off incredibly casual, completely ignoring the fact that she had boycotted my wedding the day before. Morning, Maya. Hope the wedding was cute. Vegas is absolutely crazy right now. Chloe is so exhausted from her big day. 10 minutes later, another text. Listen, honey, we hit a bit of a snag. Chloe's new husband's credit card got declined at the Bellagio. They won't let them check in to the bridal suite. Since you saved so much money by having a smaller wedding yesterday, could you wire us about $5,000? Consider it your wedding gift to your baby sister. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. I had paid for 30 people to eat a 5-course meal in Hawaii, and she claimed I saved money because they didn't show up. Then came Chloe's texts, directly to me. Maya, Mom said you aren't answering. Stop being petty. I know you're probably annoyed we aren't in Hawaii, but my wedding is just as important as yours. Don't be selfish. We are literally sitting in the casino lobby with our luggage. Wire the money to my Venmo ASAP. The final message was from my mother, sent just 10 minutes ago. Maya, this is an emergency. Answer your phone. Family helps family. Family helps family. The words made my blood boil. They used my airline tickets to fly to Vegas, abandoned me at the altar, and now expected me to fund their luxury hotel suite? I typed out a reply, my thumbs hovering over the digital keyboard. But then I stopped. I erased it. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them anything at all. Instead of replying to their frantic demands for money, I simply turned off my phone and slid it into the pocket of my robe. I walked back into the bedroom, where Mark was just waking up, stretching his arms with a sleepy smile. I sat on the edge of the bed and told him everything. The missed calls, the texts, the audacity of my mother asking me to fund the very elopement that ruined my wedding day. Mark sat up, his expression hardening. Tell me you didn't send them a dime. I didn't send them anything, I said, a newfound strength steadying my voice. In fact, I didn't even reply. After a quiet breakfast on our balcony, we met Mr. Sterling in the business center of the resort. He had laid out the thick stack of trust documents. As I picked up the pen to sign my name, I felt a profound shift within myself. With every stroke of ink, I was claiming the future my father had desperately wanted for me. I was officially taking control of an inheritance that secured my family's future, my new family, with Mark. When the final page was signed, Mr. Sterling handed me a heavy, embossed envelope containing the finalized trust details. I was completely financially independent. They could never use my generosity against me again. The remaining 6 days of our honeymoon were nothing short of magical. For the very first time in my adult life, I wasn't managing a crisis. There were no tearful phone calls from my mother complaining about her neighbors. There were no dramatic texts from Chloe needing to be bailed out of a bad decision. It was just Mark, the vast ocean, and an overwhelming sense of peace. We went snorkeling in the crystal-clear coves of Molokini, spotting sea turtles gliding gracefully through the coral. We took a sunset sailing trip, sipping champagne as the sky turned brilliant shades of violet and gold. We laughed, we dreamed about buying a home with a big backyard, and we talked about the future without the heavy shadow of my family looming over us. Every night, before I went to sleep, I would glance at my phone. The notifications were still piling up, a toxic digital landfill of missed calls, angry voicemails, and demanding texts from my mother and sister. But I kept it on silent. The distance provided by the Pacific Ocean was physical, but the emotional distance I was building felt even larger. I was healing, slowly stitching together the pieces of my self-worth that they had chipped away at for years. I dreaded returning home, but I knew I was coming back a completely different woman. The flight back to our home in Seattle was long and quiet. As the plane touched down and the wheels screeched against the wet tarmac, reality came rushing back in. The protective bubble of our Hawaiian paradise popped, replaced by the gloomy, gray drizzle of the Pacific Northwest. While we waited at the baggage claim, I finally listened to the voicemails. My mother's tone had shifted from casually demanding to outright furious. "Maya, this is ridiculous," her voice echoed through my earpiece, shrill and impatient. "Chloe had to downgrade to a standard room because you ignored us. Her new husband is furious. You are ruining her special week with your petty jealousy. Call me the second you get this. You owe her a massive apology." I deleted the voicemail before she even finished speaking. The old Maya would have felt a suffocating pang of guilt. The old Maya would have internalized the blame, convinced that I was somehow a terrible sister for not answering the phone on my own honeymoon. But the new Maya, the one who walked down the aisle alone and read her late father's letter, felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. I grabbed my suitcase from the carousel, took Mark's hand, and walked out into the rain. It was Sunday afternoon, 2 days after we had returned from Hawaii. Mark and I were sitting in our living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and bubble wrap, quietly organizing the wedding gifts that our friends had shipped directly to the house. We had ordered a pizza, playing soft jazz music in the background, fully enjoying the quiet domestic bliss. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite chime. It was followed by a frantic, heavy pounding on the wooden door. Mark and I exchanged a confused look. We weren't expecting any deliveries, and our friends knew we were still settling in. I stood up, dusting off my jeans, and walked toward the entryway. I leaned forward to peer through the small glass peephole. My stomach instantly dropped to the floor. Standing on my front porch, shielding themselves from the rain under a shared umbrella, were my mother and Chloe. Chloe looked thoroughly miserable, dragging a large pink suitcase behind her. My mother was glaring at my front door, her finger jammed repeatedly against the doorbell. They had flown back from Vegas and driven straight to my house. The time for avoidance was over. The confrontation had literally arrived at my doorstep. I took a deep breath, mentally reinforcing the steel walls my father's letter had helped me build. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open, blocking the threshold with my body. I didn't invite them in. "Well, it's about time," my mother snapped, pushing the umbrella aside. "Have you lost your mind, Maya? We have been calling you for a week." "Chloe's honeymoon was an absolute disaster because of you." "Because of me?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I looked at my sister, who was actively pouting, her arms crossed over her chest. "Yes, because of you," Chloe whined. "My husband's card got frozen, and we had to stay in a cheap motel off the strip for the last 3 days."
"If you had just wired the money like Mom asked, it would have been fine. You're so incredibly selfish, Maya." I stared at them, absorbing the sheer delusion of their words. They had boycotted my destination wedding, used the flights I purchased to elope, abandoned me on the most important day of my life, and they had the nerve to stand on my porch and call me selfish. "I paid $30,000 for a wedding you both abandoned," I stated firmly, my eyes locked on my mother's. "I walked down the aisle to 30 empty chairs. You didn't even have the decency to call and apologize. You only reached out when you needed my wallet." My mother scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Oh, please, Maya, stop being so dramatic. You had Mark." "Chloe was vulnerable and needed her family. I am her family too," I whispered, the final thread of our relationship snapping. "But not anymore." My mother's face flushed a deep, indignant shade of crimson. She stepped forward, trying to wedge her foot inside the doorway, but I held my ground. For the first time in 28 years, I was not intimidated by her anger. "You can't just say that," she shrieked, her voice echoing loudly through the quiet suburban neighborhood. "We are your family, Maya. You are my daughter." "You don't get to just dismiss us because your feelings are a little hurt over a scheduling conflict." "A scheduling conflict?" I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "You boycotted my wedding, Mom. You used my money to fund Chloe's elopement. My feelings aren't a little hurt. My relationship with you is entirely broken. I have nothing left to give you." "Maya, please," Chloe whined, stepping closer, the rain soaking her hair. "My husband is in the car. We just need a place to stay for a few weeks until we find an apartment, and maybe a small loan to get us on our feet." I looked at my sister, taking in her genuine confusion. She truly believed the universe and my wallet revolved around her. "No," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "You are adults. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. You are not staying here, and I am never giving you another dime. Please leave my property before I call the authorities for trespassing." Before either of them could utter another word, I stepped back and slammed the heavy oak door shut, locking the deadbolt with a resounding click. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding in my chest, as Mark wrapped his arms around me. Through the wood, I could hear my mother screaming my name, but I didn't flinch. I was finally free. The next morning, I woke up with a singular mission:
Sitting at the kitchen island with a steaming mug of coffee and my laptop, I began the meticulous process of severing the remaining strings my family had attached to me. For years, I had quietly subsidized their lives under the guise of helping out. I logged into my cellular provider account and removed my mother and Chloe from my unlimited family plan. With a few clicks, their phones were disconnected. Next, I logged into my auto insurance portal and removed Chloe's car, a policy I had been paying since she graduated high school. Finally, I called the bank and permanently canceled the emergency credit card I had given my mother 2 years ago. I watched my screen as the joint account was closed, effectively cutting off the financial pipeline they had grown so accustomed to draining. "How does it feel?" Mark asked gently, setting a plate of scrambled eggs down beside my laptop. "Like I can finally breathe," I admitted, looking up at him with a tired but genuine smile. I knew the fallout would be massive. Without my subsidies, my mother would have to budget her pension, and Chloe would actually have to rely on her brand new husband instead of her older sister. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own life to build, my own household to manage, and a massive trust fund to protect. My father had given me the ultimate shield, and I was going to use it to ensure they never took advantage of my kindness again. It didn't take long for the retaliation to begin. By Tuesday afternoon, my mother and sister had realized that their credit cards were declining and their phones were disconnected. Unable to text or call me directly, they took the only route they had left: public humiliation and family gossip. I was at my desk, reviewing some of the investment portfolios Mr. Sterling had sent over when my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, sent me a scathing message on Facebook. "Maya, I am absolutely disgusted with you. Your mother is in tears. Throwing your own sister out into the street because you are jealous she got married the same weekend as you, and cutting off your mother's phone? You are a cold, heartless girl. I can't believe I almost flew to Hawaii to support you." I stared at the message, my brow furrowing in deep confusion. Almost flew to Hawaii? I quickly opened Facebook and went to my Aunt Susan's page. There it was, a long, dramatic post from my mother, painting herself as the ultimate victim. In her twisted version of the story, she claimed that I had demanded they go to Vegas to support Chloe, only to turn around and ruthlessly punish them for missing my wedding. She told our extended family that I was hoarding my wealth and abandoning them in their time of need. They hadn't just abandoned me, they had lied to our entire extended family to make themselves the victims. The betrayal stung, but this time, I wasn't going to retreat into the shadows and cry. I had the truth, and I had the receipts. I refused to let my mother's false narrative ruin my reputation. I opened a new document on my computer and began composing a mass message to my Aunt Susan, my uncle, and the rest of our extended family who had liked my mother's disparaging post. "Aunt Susan," I typed, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "I think you have been severely misinformed. I never asked my mother to go to Vegas. In fact, I paid $30,000 for our family's flights and accommodations to Hawaii, only for them to secretly reroute their tickets to Nevada on the day of my rehearsal dinner. I didn't stop there. I attached screenshots of the flight manifests showing the rerouted tickets. I attached the text message my mother sent me during my rehearsal dinner, casually announcing they were skipping my wedding. Finally, I attached the texts they sent on the morning after my wedding, demanding I wire them $5,000 to pay for Chloe's hotel suite while I was on my honeymoon. I walked down the aisle to 30 empty chairs. I concluded, I cut off their credit cards because I will no longer fund people who treat me like a bank rather than a daughter or a sister. You are free to support them, but you will not do so by assassinating my character based on a lie. I hit send, my hand trembling slightly from the adrenaline. I had never spoken up for myself this fiercely in my entire life. I closed my laptop, walked away from the desk, and waited for the explosion. The explosion didn't come. Instead, an unprecedented, deafening silence fell over the extended family. For 24 hours, not a single person replied to my message. I went to work, cooked dinner with Mark, and tried to push the anxiety away. Then, on Wednesday evening, my phone finally rang. It was Aunt Susan. I hesitated before answering, bracing myself for more yelling. "Hello? Maya?" Aunt Susan's voice was thick, choked with genuine emotion. "Oh, my sweet girl, I am so deeply, deeply sorry." I paused, stunned by the absolute reversal in her tone. "Aunt Susan?" "I saw the texts," she sobbed softly. "Your mother told us that you had a meltdown, that you canceled the Hawaiian wedding at the last minute and told us all to stay home. She said she only went to Vegas to console Chloe because you ruined the weekend. We had no idea, Maya. We had no idea you stood at the altar alone. We thought we were doing what you wanted." Tears pricked my eyes as the truth finally clicked into place. My mother hadn't just rerouted her own flight. She had manipulated the entire extended family into missing my wedding so she wouldn't look like the only one who abandoned me. She orchestrated the entire boycott to protect her own image. "I'm so sorry, Aunt Susan," I whispered, the tears finally falling. "No, honey, you have nothing to apologize for," she replied firmly. "I am driving to your mother's house right now. There is going to be a reckoning, Maya. I promise you that." The fallout from Aunt Susan's realization was swift and absolute. For my entire life, my mother had carefully controlled the family narrative, painting herself as a selfless matriarch and me as the difficult, distant daughter. But with a single mass email and undeniable screenshots, her delicate house of cards completely collapsed. Later that night, Aunt Susan called me back, her voice shaking with residual anger. She had driven straight to my mother's house and confronted her with the printed text messages. Faced with the undeniable proof of her deceit, my mother had crumbled, unable to twist her way out of the lie. My aunt demanded to know why she had sabotaged my wedding. The truth was agonizingly petty. My mother couldn't stand the thought of me receiving the family's undivided attention for a weekend while Chloe was feeling left behind in her own life. So she manufactured a crisis, convincing everyone that I had canceled the event, seamlessly pivoting the family's focus to Chloe's impulsive Vegas elopement. By Thursday morning, my phone was flooded with messages, but this time they were from my extended family. Cousins, uncles, and family friends poured out their heartfelt apologies, expressing their deep shame and regret for missing my wedding. They sent me photos of the wedding gifts they had intended to bring, promising to make it up to me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't standing alone in the shadows. My extended family finally saw the toxic dynamic my father had warned me about, and they unequivocally chose to stand by my side. A month passed. The crisp autumn air settled over Seattle, bringing with it a deep sense of routine and peace. Mark and I were officially moved into our new home, a beautiful, sprawling property we purchased using a small portion of my father's trust. The extended family visited frequently, bringing warmth and laughter to our living room. My mother and Chloe, however, were entirely isolated. Cut off from my financial support and ostracized by our relatives, reality had finally hit them. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. It was my mother. "Maya," her voice trembled, lacking the usual sharp edge of authority. "Please, honey, pick up. Chloe's husband left her. He couldn't handle the financial stress when your money stopped coming in. We are struggling. The family won't speak to us, and I realize now how terribly I failed you. I am so sorry. Please, let me be your mother again. Let us fix this." I sat on my new porch, listening to the sound of her quiet sobbing through the speaker. Years ago, that sound would have sent me rushing to her rescue, wallet in hand, desperate to earn her love. But now, the tears felt hollow. I didn't doubt that she was genuinely sad, but I knew she was mourning the loss of her comfort and her status, not the loss of her eldest daughter. She wasn't calling because she missed Maya. She was calling because she missed her safety net. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet them one last time. I needed closure, not just for them, but for myself. We met at a quiet, neutral coffee shop downtown. Mark sat at a table by the window, giving me space, but remaining close enough to offer a reassuring nod. When my mother and Chloe walked in, they looked distinctly deflated. The designer bags and arrogant postures were gone, replaced by tired eyes and nervous fidgeting. They sat across from me, the silence stretching between us like a physical chasm. "Maya, thank you for coming," my mother started, her voice thick with emotion. "We have lost everything. We lost our family. We lost our dignity. I know I was blind. I enabled Chloe, and I sacrificed you in the process.
I am begging you to give us a second chance to be a real family." Chloe looked down at her hands, tears spilling onto the wooden table. "I'm sorry, Maya. I really am. I ruined your day because I was jealous. I've always been jealous of how strong you are." I looked at the two women who had defined my entire existence. I saw their brokenness, their deep-seated insecurities, and the tragic consequences of their own selfishness. I felt a profound sense of sorrow for them, but I also felt an impenetrable shield of self-respect protecting my heart. My father's final gift hadn't just been money. It had been the permission to finally value myself. I took a deep breath, folding my hands neatly on the table. "I appreciate your apologies," I said gently, my voice steady and calm. "And I want you both to know that I forgive you." My mother's eyes widened with sudden, desperate hope. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I politely pulled it back. "I forgive you," I repeated, making sure she heard the boundaries in my tone. "I forgive you because carrying around this anger and resentment is too heavy, and I refuse to bring that toxicity into my marriage. I forgive you for abandoning me at the altar. I forgive you for lying to our family. But forgiveness does not mean permission to re-enter my life." Chloe's head snapped up, her lip trembling. "What do you mean? You just said you forgive us." "I did," I nodded. "But trust is earned, and you have entirely destroyed mine. I will not fund your mistakes anymore, Chloe, and I will not allow you to manipulate my emotions, Mom. I am letting go of my anger, but I am also letting go of you. I wish you both the best, truly, but this is where our paths permanently diverge." I stood up from the table, the scrape of the chair sounding incredibly final. My mother buried her face in her hands, weeping loudly, but I didn't stop to comfort her. I turned my back, walked over to Mark, and took his hand. We walked out of the coffee shop together, stepping into the crisp, bright afternoon light. Exactly 1 year after our fateful destination wedding, Mark and I hosted an anniversary dinner in the expansive backyard of our new home. The patio was strung with glowing fairy lights, much like the reception in Maui, but this time, the seats were entirely full. Aunt Susan, my uncle, my cousins, and Mark's wonderful parents sat around the long, rustic wooden table, their laughter echoing into the night sky. There were no empty chairs. There was no tension, no looming threat of a tantrum, and no one demanding to be the center of attention. We were surrounded by people who loved us genuinely, who showed up for us without an ulterior motive. Before dessert was served, I stood up, tapping my champagne glass. The table quieted down, turning their warm, smiling faces toward me. "A year ago, I thought I had lost my family," I said softly, looking around the table, my eyes shining with happy tears. "But looking at all of you tonight, I realize I didn't lose anything. I just had to make room for the truth. I want to raise a glass to my late father, Arthur Sterling, and to every single person sitting at this table. Thank you for showing me what real, unconditional love looks like." "To family," Mark cheered, raising his glass high. "To family," the table echoed back in a joyous chorus. I took a sip of champagne, feeling a profound, unshakable peace settle deep in my bones. I had survived the ultimate betrayal, But I had not let it turn my heart cold. I had broken the cycle, honored my father's legacy, and built a beautiful, resilient life. I was finally, truly home.